All right, welcome back, everybody, and welcome to the penultimate, I believe is the right term, panel of the day, Procurement and Talent in the Digital Age. The subtitle is Restructure DoITT, create a digital service of crack tech workers, explore what the city can do to become a more effective purchaser, developer, and manager of technology projects. So it wins the award for longest subtitle and total title of the day. With us today, we have Andrew Rasiej. Andrew is a civic and social entrepreneur, technology strategist, and founder of Civic Hall. He is the chairman emeritus of the New York Tech Alliance, a 60,000 plus member organization of New Yorkers from diverse industries working in the New York technology ecosystem. And if Politico is to be believed, Andrew is also advising the incoming Adams administration on technology. Do you care to comment?
Fake news.
Oh, boy. All right. With us also is Arielle Cannon. Arielle is a senior fellow at the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown. At Beeck, she's researching and advising on best practices for using design, data, and technology for improved social safety net programs and policy outcomes and the equitable investment of recovery funding. She previously served as the Director of Design and Product in the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity, and most recently was the Director of Civic Innovation at Sidewalk Labs. Welcome, Arielle. And Michael Pastor. Michael is the Director of the James Tricarico Jr. Institute for the Business of Law and in-house counsel and adjunct professor of law at New York Law School. He formerly served as the General Counsel and Deputy Commissioner for Legal Affairs and Franchises at DoITT, and he also served as the first General Counsel of New York City Cyber Command. All right. It's safe to say that most of us here are pretty excited about the use of urban technology in New York City. But of course, cities have to design, procure, implement, manage, and maintain all of this technology. And the city has at times struggled to do so. Whether it was the city time contract, which went well over budget, and a few folks in jail, or the vaccine signups under Mayor de Blasio, which of course was a challenge that was circumvented thanks to a lot of civic tech entrepreneurs here. At the same time, we've had some significant advances in what the city is capable of doing, and so we want to get, how do we make more successes than failures, and how do we limit those failures? I want to start off with Arielle and Mike. Either of you is welcome to take this. What's going on under the hood within the city's technology departments? What did you see during your time in city government? Mike, I know it was 15 years, Arielle, what, five years or so? 4 years. What went well? What could have gone better? Mike, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. I guess where I wanted to start in terms of what went well, since we're talking about talent, is that what I saw up front, sort of under the hood, as you said, was an incredible wealth of talent in terms of people working for the city of New York and technology. The draw of the city of New York remains huge. People love this place, they want to serve it, and that includes a lot of technology people. So what I saw was incredibly talented people working very, very hard to solve technology problems and doing it for a lot less money than they otherwise could do it in the private sector. I think on the negative side, I think that there is fragmentation in city government in terms of who is empowered to purchase technology, to make technology choices, and that fragmentation means that there is a lack of coherent technology strategy from the citywide level. So those are one good, one bad.
I agree with a lot of what Michael says as well. I originally joined the mayor's office to bring my skills as a designer and product professional to bear on the city that I love so much. And I found that we had really so many talented, and it's definitely the most collegial place that I've ever worked, that we're all in this together to make this place better. However, very differing abilities. Not everyone's upskilled on some of the more modern practices, whether that's software development that really works for mobile devices or can use APIs and some of the more things that any tech entrepreneur would know, and that's what you would do out the gate, as well as some of the more human-centered design practices of really going out, not only the skills to be able to talk to people and take their insights and get their feedback and bring them in, but also the permission to be able to do that. And so I did a lot of work not only to hire more people with those skills, as well as use the carrot of the mayor's office to be able to say, actually, we're going to grant you permission and help build a lot more capacity in working in these new ways in other parts of the city as well.
I'm going to turn over to Andrew for the second question, and we're going to dive into some of those pros and cons in a little bit. But the report from Cornell Tech talks a lot about structure. And one of our recommendations is a deputy mayor of technology. Over the years, the city has expanded the headcount within DoITT, but it has also created a multitude of other city agencies that are focused on technology, whether it be Cyber Command, Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity, Mayor's Office of Data and Analytics, and so on. We recommend that this deputy mayor for technology essentially serve as the chief technology officer, and we bring those other agencies underneath it. Now, a wise man once suggested this about 8 years ago, and he is sitting right next to me. Andrew, is this something that you still think makes sense? Why or why not?
Well, Mike, thanks for inviting me, and it's really nice to see so many familiar faces and colleagues in the room. So if you had a mayor for technology and innovation, you would need a deputy mayor for technology and innovation. And this mayor is definitely thinking of himself as an innovation mayor. So, and I guess you could ask pretty much any mayor in America would probably want to be called an innovation mayor. So that's not so much of a surprise. But from what I've been able to cull from my interactions with the mayor-elect is that he's going to take it far more seriously and may in fact appoint someone who is, in your words, the deputy mayor for technology. But even though I had tried very hard to convince the current mayor to create that role the last time, and instead, I think as a reaction to the Bloomberg years, decided to have fewer deputy mayors and instead create the office of the CTO under the mayor's office, my thinking about this has evolved over time. And I'm not quite sure it's the same structure because what really needs to happen for the city is technology has to be thought of not as a siloed set of agencies, but rather as a transformational process. And that under a deputy mayor structure, you have a deputy mayor who has portfolios of agencies underneath them, and you're in effect putting somebody in charge at the same level as the other deputy mayors when all those other deputy mayors should be transforming their agencies to the digital age themselves. So maybe another structure that would work, and maybe it's not the title deputy mayor, because I think that title came from some frustration that people had that there wasn't somebody centrally located who was going to answer to everybody's questions, is that there should be an enterprise level CIO that has government experience, maybe private sector experience, that reports to the mayor and has on a matrix level all the other agency CIOs reporting to him or her as well as to their commissioners, not unlike the corporate councils that the agencies now report to the corporate council. And that you maybe insert key people in certain agencies, like somebody who really understands tech working with the OMB, working at the OMB would be helpful. But maybe there also needs to be somebody with a vision, because CIOs can help make the trains run on time, but you also need to have a vision and a perspective on technology, especially as it continues to evolve and change. So maybe it's really an advisor to the first deputy mayor on technology, who then has the power to be able to actually effectuate data standardization, changes in procurement, changes in training, or and something that we didn't think about 8 years ago, and Mike knows better than anybody, which is that the city is under constant threat from cyber attacks. And Eric Adams is going to own cybersecurity on day one. He's not going to get a honeymoon. There are a number of models that can be thought of. I think the question really is, do you have budget? Do you have the mayor's ear? And do you have the will to create change of culture within the administration to ultimately, over not a year, not in 1 month, but over 4 to 8 years, transform the city finally into the digital arena that it should be to be able to serve New Yorkers better?
I want to dive in on that one and go to Ariel. You mentioned really two core functions. One is the function of a chief information officer, a CIO, or a chief innovation officer, chief information officer, however you want to respond to it. Of course, in the city, we're thinking about information, but also service design, technology development, building new technology. In your opinion, should that be the same person? Is that something that would fall under an agency level CIO, or how is that done now?
I think the thing we're finding now, and this isn't new about government, is that technology plays a role in every part of service delivery, whether that's a digital service that somebody is actually accessing themselves at home, or a case database, or a worker database. There's technology to every part of the service delivery. And so really helping to understand those systems as a whole. We can't just look at that one point of impact. We have to look at all of the points of impact. And often those things are multi-agency, different levels of stakeholders, different types of workers, depending on the program. There's also lots of external factors, like the city spends billions of dollars on health and human services contracted out to community-based organizations. Those workers use those tools too. So I think having teams in place that can do that holistic view of service delivery, if you can understand a resident's journey from the point of contact through all of the different steps, through all the different agencies, all the different systems they might be touching, as well as the worker's experience as part of that. And I think that that's a capacity building and a way of thinking to make its way into the agencies, but also to be steered from City Hall. I think that it's a complementary skill set to maybe an enterprise technology leader, and of course, obviously making sure that things are secure and people's privacy is being preserved in these digital tools as well. And so it's really going to take a multidisciplinary approach, and I think that capacity building across City Hall and the agencies.
Michael, 15 years, you reported to multiple commissioners and deputy mayors over those years. Talk to me about the structure. Does it need to change? What's working, what's not with the structure?
Yeah, so I just want to pick up on the points that Andrew and Arielle made. I mean, I think that so I worked at the law department. The law department is headed by the Corporation Counsel. The Corporation Counsel reports directly to the mayor, and to Andrew's point, definitely has the ear of the mayor on all legal matters. The budget director, as anyone who's worked in city government knows, definitely has the ear of the mayor and the budget director. It goes back and forth, but there's a direct line. I would argue that there should be a lead for technology, whatever you call it, that is akin to those positions. There's no reason that technology should be less important than legal matters or than budget. It's gotten to that point where I think we really need that. So I think that one thing I would say about the deputy mayor idea is that there's a difference. Deputy mayors typically oversee other commissioners that are doing things, that are running things. I find that City Hall is not the right place to necessarily be running things. It is about organizing, it is about structuring priorities, but in terms of implementing technology for city agencies, and even speaking for the city on technology matters, I don't know that you need someone in a deputy mayor forum. I think you need someone independent who can speak with. I think the city needs one person speaking for the city on essentially all key technology matters at the level where they're directly reporting to the mayor.
All right.
I just want to jump in real quick on something Ariel reminded me about. So some of you may know about the TDC, which was the Technology Development Corporation that existed for a little while and then was sort of left fallow over the last several years. EDC, which was started in the Koch administration, was a 5-member group initially. And I actually would love to see the next administration refund at a several $100 million level the TDC to actually do some of the innovation work that can't actually be done at some of the agencies yet, either because they haven't yet upskilled themselves or have the perspective to do so or the data skills to do so. But they're busy running and delivering services, so it's hard sometimes to change the engine while you're driving down the road. And that the city kind of needs a skunk works to be able to experiment, maybe even fail, but be able to then test out and actually build some things that need to get built, but not on a small budget, on a real budget that then could create a New York City digital service, maybe bring back sort of the 18F kind of culture to the city of New York in a way that would allow for more innovation to happen, part and parcel in partnership with agencies that are trying to innovate and learn. And that's the challenge. They all are trying to learn, and it's really hard to learn while you're busy trying to deliver services. Still driving a 1980s Pontiac, which many of these agencies still do.
Well, this is proof that we didn't give these guys the questions ahead of time because Andrew just jumped ahead to question 4, which is our recommendation suggests bringing in a crack team of technologists and taking some lessons from the federal government. For those of you who don't know, the U.S. Digital Service, and they're also hiring, are looking for some, they work within the executive branch of the federal government and are deployed to work on key technology projects. 18F within the federal government is under the General Services Administration, and they act more as a team of consultants that are able to consult with agencies throughout the federal government with technology challenges. Arielle, you've done this type of service development work. You've worked with these agencies within City Hall. There are folks who suggest that what we just need more is more training, more consulting, more external folks involved. What about an internal team? And what do you think of having that be in City Hall versus what Andrew suggested here in a technology development corporation?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, there's several groups across the city who have already proved it, including the current CTO's office, NYC Opportunity, where I used to work. There's even some teams at DoITT that are really using more of these modern practices, except that they have been totally underinvested and they don't have enough people or resources to really deliver on things at scale. I think about how we were hiring and building our team is that we were getting lines from different agencies and pulling things together, and it always felt like it was a big ask just to get one more person, let alone thinking about a whole team of people that's really needed to deliver. I think the USDS model would be great to work on mayoral priorities. That's what they do at the White House, and they're largely focused on those, and they're funded and work with the agencies as partners. 18F is great because it has a chargeback model, and so that they're actually getting paid. But I think some of the other things that those teams have done is create knowledge and capacity about new ways of doing work. So often I saw really talented policy and business people who were wanting to do the right thing for the city, but didn't have the skills and technology to ask for anything different than what the big master services agreement consultants are producing, which is not modern technology or design for that matter, and they didn't know how to ask for anything different. And so we need our policy and business people to know a different way of working, to be empowered in order to do that, new types of contracts so that we can hire more of the great firms that work here right in New York City who are leaders in technology and design, and that we can really transform how services are delivered. So it's a mix of both.
I'm going to come back to the master service agreements and the consulting
I have a lot to say about
contract.
that.
But Michael, I want your take on this because you've been on the legal nuts and bolts of this. We talked about essentially 3 different models, maybe in 4 different models, where you're working within the existing structure, you're adding new teams or departments in the way of a digital service. You're having a city contracted agency and a technology development corporation, or you're having an external partners in terms of other tech companies. Can you talk a little bit about legally or structurally, can you make this work?
So what I would say is, the changing of administrations is a major opportunity all across the board. And so what I would say, just by way of one example there, is that we have, as many of the group here probably knows, civil service laws in the state of New York that specify certain means for local governments to hire. And by the way, those civil service laws, which get a bad reputation in tech settings for fair reasons, have a very noble underpinning. Right? They come from a place where jobs used to be handed out for corrupt reasons. And so what they say is, instead of looking at corruption or contacts or networks, which can actually have an equity overlay as well, in addition to corruption, you're going to do exams and you're going to test, competitively, which can also have its own problems. But I don't want to go too down, the civil service rabbit hole, just saying that if those laws stand in the way of achieving whatever the city wants to do on technology, they should be changed. Like the new mayor should look at it and work with the governor and the state legislature to make any changes that are needed. Now is the time. The mayor will be empowered. He will have just started. If those laws stand in the way, and I could probably spend lots of time saying why I think maybe they do, then they should look at it right away.
Well, we have a new administration in Albany too, so now it's a great opportunity to try to get it done. They
Agree.
They kind of need each other. But there's another factor that can't be discounted, which is that New York City has the most empathetic private sector workforce in the world. And it already has one of the largest communities, if not the largest community, of civic tech, urban technologists in the world. And many of them are ready, willing, and able to partner with the city and have been rebuffed for years with their ideas and their technologies. And so it's not really, yes, we need structures to fix a lot of the bureaucracy, Michael, but a lot of it has to do with the profile and the posture of the city and welcoming the private sector into the conversations around innovation, delivery of service, and taking advantage of a muscle that New York City has that's greater than any other that I've ever seen. Beta NYC is a perfect example of that community.
I want to talk about the technology workers who are already within City Hall. We've talked about this a little bit earlier in the back room and outside. There was about over 1,200 employees that do it, and if not, maybe 1,000 plus more through several other technology organizations within the city. What role does reskilling, training, and the opportunity to work with existing employees, what role does that play now, and what would the advice be for the next administration or structural change to see that improved? Arielle?
Sure. We did a lot of work when I was at NYC Opportunity with the service design studio of helping our fellow public servants learn the basics of design. It doesn't turn them into necessarily professional designers, but helps them really think about design questions and how to actually go out and talk to people. And that had scaled from kind of one-on-one office hours to larger workshops. And that, I talked about this before, some of the granting of permission to be able to work in new ways is incredibly transformative from the mayor's office perspective. I think there's the groups that are already delivering technology. Every agency, by and large, has probably hundreds of technology workers. Civil service changes need to happen, but I think that we can also really invest in helping our workers learn new ways of working. If you were a software engineer and maybe you work on a legacy system, there's no reason why you couldn't learn new skills and maybe be working in a new way. But I think the organization has to change and shift along with that. You as an individual just saying, well, I learned a new programming language isn't going to fundamentally change the way we deliver. There has to really be the leadership and vision that goes with it.
Do they have that opportunity today, Michael, in your opinion?
To innovate from within the current structure?
Not only to innovate within, but to upskill.
Yeah, I think so. But I actually, and I hate to just keep banging the structure nail, but it's what's in my mind. I think that right now we have multiple IT systems within the city of New York. And I think from a worker perspective, if you are thinking about technological innovation or the skills you might need, but then you bump into a situation where, oh, I'm building a tool for, and I'm making it up, I'm not naming names, but I'm building a tool for HRA, which has its own, and is that going to integrate with the tool for name your other agency that has a different system? So I think there are ways in which the structural problems informs people's ability to be agile. And
I think there's already some professional development funding. I think it comes out of DCAS, if I'm not right. But it's so minuscule. A New York City public school teacher gets 1 day of paid professional development a year. It's ridiculous. And the other challenge is that the technology keeps evolving and changing. It's not a steady state. It's moving. The private sector, and both Civic Hall and HRNA and CUF have put out reports about the technology gap where private industry is realizing that the workers that are being trained in workforce development programs and even at universities are not actually learning the skills that they need to hire for in the next 3 to 5 years. So the game's going to change again in 3 to 5 years, and the city's not even caught up from 5 years ago. So you need to invest in your workforce the same way that companies invest in their own human resources. And when we're negotiating with the governor and with the unions, what we can say to the unions is, allow us to change the designation so we can hire people from the private sector at the skill level we need today. And in exchange, we will provide professional development to your members so they can get better pay and better jobs as if they want to advance. But this idea that you have only one designation for an IT professional under the civil service rules is ridiculous. So there are major structural issues. As I said before, the issues in the city's technological advancements are not actually technological. They're structural, political, economic, and frankly, a lack of vision. What you need is a vision in order to be able to achieve these things. And hopefully this mayor, when he comes in, will establish a vision, put the right people in place, and partner with the civic tech community, partner with the private sector, and will move this city forward.
I do think that there's examples too of other upskilling, whether it's the development boot camps that have helped a lot of people. There's several that have been founded here in New York, but also city-funded and EDC-funded initiatives like the Tech Talent Pipeline, which has given a tremendous number of young people opportunity now to work in the private sector of tech industry. We could invest in similar ways, I think, in our city's workforce as well. And the pipeline to public service. It's something we actually haven't talked about. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but every government nationally is facing an enormous number of workers that will be retiring in the next decade. And so there are lots of civil service lines to be filled with younger people with new skills who can really help us make this transformation.
All right, I got one more big one, and I promise because we would return to MSAs, master service agreements. One of the challenges that we constantly run in with city government is you want to procure something, it takes a long time. You want to build something, well, you could buy it right off the shelf. One of the responses by the city has been to lean heavier into master service agreements. Some of these contracts have gone up to a couple $2 billion, but it's significantly cut down on the time it takes to procure technology, both hardware and software. And B, it has helped standardize technology across multiple departments. Of course, many detractors have said that it's really difficult to track and oversee some of that funding, what it's going towards, and whether it's worth it, whether some of these tools should be built internally, and whether it makes sense to continue with these contracts. So this is a free-for-all. What are the thoughts on those MSAs? We've talked about how it's a time where we can make some transitions or changes. What's working, what's not?
So I want to start on the positive side, because I'm sure there might be a lot negative to say about MSAs, and that's fine. I do want to just sort of cite one example, which is as it relates to these enterprise level agreements for the purchase of telecommunication services. What the city did a number of years ago is they issued an RFP to the providers of telecommunication services. Those multiple telecommunications companies responded, and since that time, multiple telecommunications companies have entered into these MSAs with the city, pursuant to terms that are negotiated by the lawyers for the city that are strong. Two things about that. One, those are now extremely useful, and they also have a component of competition embedded in them, which is a good thing. So you can go to a different bunch of telecommunication companies, you can have them working against each other, and you can buy stuff. On the negative side, the process to put those in place is very long. And I will just say, and obviously I came from working with DoITT and the CTO and Cyber Command, I can tell you that the people inside wanted it to be quicker. I can guarantee you they want everything to be quicker, but there are just certain things in the way. But I think that the new mayor would do well to look at that example as, wow, that there's some positive there, in addition to all the perhaps negative enterprise agreement stories that he might hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of master services agreements is right, which is that you enter into the master services agreement so the core contract isn't getting edited over and over and over again. You are largely being able to put out, smaller scopes of work that then get approved against that contract. So in theory, it should all work faster. I think a lot of the technology master services contractors are the big consultancies. They have very little incentive to be working in new ways. It's a lot of waterfall software development, the old processes. They make money off of that. They make a lot of money. Our taxpayer dollars are spending a lot of money delivering technology that does not actually work for New Yorkers. And so when I was there, which was building off of a lot of work of people who came before me, a good idea in government, somebody had it before you. And we worked with DoITT as a partner actually to put forward a design master services agreement, which would allow firms that are versed in service design and UX and product design and graphic design and branding be on a similar type of agreement so that cities could actually procure those services on a much faster route. After I left government, that contract was canceled, but I think that there's a really big opportunity, and nobody got to deliver any work under the contract, so it wasn't like something went wrong, it just got canceled. Somebody changed their mind. But I think there's a really big opportunity to be able to work with the great firms that are here and based in New York. We are the center of the design economy. in the world, and we have the firms that can really deliver and want to deliver on behalf of the city. And we have people inside government now who want to deliver in new ways, and so they need to be able to buy those services and work, it's not one or the other, only in-house or only procurement. It's really those two things working together to deliver something that looks very different than what we have today.
There's a whole cottage industry of incumbents that do not want to see that change happen, unfortunately. But I have just one quick comment, and this has to do with software, which is the word procurement basically implies buy once. When you're buying software, what you should really be doing is commissioning. And in the same way that you upgrade your software on your iPhone or on your computer, you should be able to demand that whoever's selling you the service is upgrading and keeping it cyber secure and up to state of the art as part of the contract. Otherwise, it ages out, and so that again is changing the way people think about it. Procurement itself can be fixed if you bring in more innovation, but the whole issue here is that the government still buys things the way it would buy, school buses or blackboards. It needs to rethink the whole model of how it interacts with services, purchasing services, and bringing in new talent.
That's a perfect segue into this last one, and I'm going to kick it off with you, Andrew. So procurement can be solved with more innovation if we rethink the way that we purchase technology. Well, what's your advice for the next mayor, for the incoming Adams administration, so that when we're having this conversation again 4 years from now, it's sharing the success stories, or 8 years from now, sharing the success stories from New York City? What's going to make New York City the leader in talent and procurement for technology?
Investing in the human resources that work for the city and the people who are being trained in the private sector, so New York can continue to lead as a tech center into the 21st century. And the second piece is to develop a strategy like data standardization and modernization that operates not as a silo out of DoITT in one agency, but actually goes across all the agencies, so that we don't service each agency with technology, but we teach them how to, as the adage goes, teach them to grow wheat rather than giving them bread.
Arielle, advice for the next mayor?
I think alongside those, it's really thinking about the voice and experiences of our residents at every part of the services that we deliver, the diversity of people who live in this city, a workforce that reflects that diversity, but also that those people are invited in to be not just giving feedback, but really participating and bringing their vision to bear on the future of our city as well.
Last word, Michael?
So definitely agree with engaging with the public. And on that theme, I mean, my one recommendation, if I had to only make one, I guess, for the incoming mayor would be to engage with the people that have been trying to do it currently. I think there's sometimes an impetus to sort of go outside, which is great because you want to have new angles. But I do think knowing what people think from the inside, with people who've been working currently to do it, there's a lot of knowledge there, good and bad. And I think that the new administration would be well to talk to them.
If I recall, I think there's going to be a couple thousand pages of transition reports that hopefully spark that conversation. But before we go to Q&A, if you could just join me in thanking these wonderful folks, Andrew, Arielle, Michael.
Thank you.
And I want to give everyone the opportunity to ask these folks some questions. So if there is any questions that we have from the audience, the mic will come over to you.
Thanks, it's a great conversation. So pushing the procurement piece even a little further. So I've been part of a bunch of conversations over the past year that are organized under the banner of OSPO++. The idea is exploring the possibility of open source program offices in cities and universities. I'm thinking about Gail Brewer's comment earlier today about the value of open data to collaboration across agencies, and I'm wondering if you've got thoughts about open source software. I don't think I heard the phrase in the last panel. Not as a normative stance, but as a pragmatic vehicle for collaboration, either across agencies or between the city and other entities, nonprofits, universities, et cetera. And what kind of bureaucratic innovation might help enable that?
Phenomenal question. Anyone want to take that one?
I mean, I can actually answer it from a Beeck Center perspective. We have a project on the State Software Collaborative where we're looking at states that are sharing software. And it's sometimes for really mundane stuff like traffic control systems. States have built these shared between either multi-state or kind of across state line systems. And they weren't necessarily always using the language of open source. And not all the systems are open source. But I think that there's people who have been working in some of these ways already that could really be amplified. There's also huge gaps where some of that type of thinking, whether it's shared software or open source software, hasn't necessarily been applied. Social services is a big one, and that every single state is kind of building its own system to deliver whatever program, and there's not a lot of sharing that's happening. But there's some new work coming now out of the Biden administration, like the Department of Labor, who's actually funding towards states that if you work together, you bring in actually teams of experts, they call them tiger teams, to be able to deliver, that they're incentivizing that with additional funding so that you can actually fix your unemployment system. And so I think that there's models like that that certainly could be incentivized for more cross-agency sharing where there's collaboration that's needed, but also New York looking out to other states that might have similar issues and challenges where we could be sharing, but also bringing in shared pieces.
Michael, do we have the regulatory, operational, cybersecurity framework to be engaging with other cities and other states when it comes to software and code?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I as one of the lawyers in the room, probably, right? I mean, everything that you're going to do, you're going to be thinking about what laws are in play for any particular thing. And with open source, there might be some interesting legal questions about what your agreements look like with whatever technology provider you're using. But I see no impediment whatsoever to getting good ideas from our fellow government officials around the country.
Well, not just federal, from the public. I mean,
That too, yeah.
It's not just the other states and cities. It's actually the open source community is far larger in the private sector than it is in the government sector.
I will say I built a lot of open source software when I was at the city, and one of our biggest challenges is that we didn't always have a great lawyer like Michael who actually understands open source and could think through the pieces, especially when it comes to design systems and the data and the actual interface, all the things that go into that, of how they work together to create a modern digital service, of what does it mean when you open source that and give the rights to be openly used by others, that there's also the legal upskilling about how technology is really delivered and works in the world as well as needed.
Excellent question. One more?
Thank you. Arielle's last comment perfectly anticipated the question that I had for Michael, which is, in our work, we're often doing service and policy and sometimes technology innovation with city agencies. And it often requires that there be a lawyer who is interested in getting to yes, a lawyer who is interested in transformation. But I never get the opportunity to say, I would like someone from the law department to ride along with our team from the very beginning of this project. Too often the lawyers come in at the very end of an innovation process and have concerns or questions, which can often slow or sometimes even derail the work. So the question is, what are the avenues to engage the city's legal apparatus meaningfully from the beginning of these kind of transformation projects so that we can get to yes on things that are really going to change the way that service and policy is delivered?
Oh, do I have another hour to take? I mean,
Digital service for lawyers?
I couldn't agree more with the premise that early engagement with the legal team and finding lawyers who are interested in engaging with the technologists is just so critical. To that point, I was the first lawyer with the Cyber Command when it was created, and helped to build it up. Got to know those people really well. And in terms of getting to yes, every time I could get to yes, I would, right? So I think that yes, I think that you don't want the lawyers at the end. And I will also say and this might not be well known, but I know for a fact that the people at the law department from the top to the bottom do want to innovate themselves. They want to be involved in these questions. They want to learn open source, or they want to learn cyber and support the technologists. They really do want to do that.
What's the mechanism to say to them, hey, here's a bunch of people who do innovation work and want to talk to you?
It's about the leaders of the organizations agreeing to do it that way.
Well, just like I suggested earlier that there should be a technologist in OMB, there probably should be a technologist sitting next to the corporate counsel. it's culture change. You'll get the lawyers to want to participate when they understand the technology and the opportunity, but they haven't been talked to. They haven't even been asked to the dance. So we've got to change the culture.
Anytime.
All right, one last round of applause for our guests here, everybody, and thank you. We got an exciting panel coming up next. Thank you all.